The apartment was too quiet. Daniel stood in the doorway of the nursery, one hand on the doorframe, the other cradling his son. The crib was neatly made, the stuffed giraffe still propped in the corner, but the other half of the room, her side, was empty. No diaper bag. No coat on the hook. No sound of her humming in the kitchen. On the dresser was a single folded note. He had read it once, twice, and again until the words burned into him. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I need to find myself again. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. The absence in the apartment was signature enough. The baby stirred in his arms, tiny fists brushing against his shirt. It's okay, buddy, Daniel murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. His voice cracked. He tried again. It's just us now. That night, Daniel learned what panic truly felt like. At 2:47 a.m., the baby started wailing. Not the soft, hungry cries he was used to hearing, this was frantic, relentless. Daniel fumbled with the bottle, scalded his finger testing the formula, tried to hold his son and measure out the powder at the same time. By the time the bottle was ready, both of them were crying. By dawn, he was slumped on the couch, the baby finally asleep against his chest, the living room a war zone of burp cloths, bottles, and exhaustion. The first stranger's judgment came less than 24 hours later. At the supermarket, he had the baby in a carrier strapped to his chest. He was looking for the smallest package of diapers, he couldn't afford to stock up yet, when a middle-aged woman in a floral cardigan smiled and said, "Oh, giving mom a break today." "No," Daniel replied, adjusting the straps. "She's not here. It's just me." Her smile faltered. "Oh. I see. Well, I'm sure you'll manage." She patted his arm like he'd just been told to water the neighbor's plants while they were away. Manage. Like he was playing house. 2 weeks later, the court papers arrived. He sat at the kitchen table, reading through legal terms that might as well have been in another language. Words like evaluation, primary caregiver, temporary placement jumped out at him. He'd have to appear before a judge to prove he could keep custody of his son. That night, he called his mother. She lived 3 states away, and her voice cracked when she heard the news. "Danny, I wish I could come, but, my health, I know, Mom," he said, keeping his voice even. "I've got this." But he didn't feel like he had it. The first hearing was worse than he expected. The opposing lawyer, representing his ex by proxy, questioned everything from his work hours to the fact that he didn't have a maternal support network. When Daniel tried to explain that he'd been the one getting up for feedings, the lawyer interrupted with, "But surely you agree that an infant benefits from a mother's care." Daniel clenched his jaw. "An infant benefits from a parent's care. And that's me." The judge's expression gave nothing away. That night, sitting on the nursery floor with his son in his arms, Daniel whispered into the soft hair at the baby's crown. "They're not taking you from me. I don't care what I have to do. I'll learn every single thing you need. I'll be there for every single day." It was 3:12 a.m. When he finally laid the baby down and sat at the computer, searching how to feed newborn at night and single father custody cases. His browser filled with guides and legal advice forums. Some stories were hopeful. Others were horror shows. Somewhere in the middle of reading, he made himself a promise, he would not become one of the horror stories. By the second month, Daniel was a machine. He could hold his son with one arm, warm a bottle with the other, and still kick the dryer door shut with his foot. His eyes were perpetually bloodshot, but his hands were steady. Every move was practiced, rehearsed 100 times in the quiet hours when the world was asleep. But the world still doubted him. The daycare tour was supposed to be a formality. He needed the spot so he could go back to work full-time, the court wanted proof of stable income. He showed up in a clean shirt, the baby strapped to his chest, paperwork neatly clipped in a folder. The receptionist barely looked up. "Mother's name." "There is no mother," Daniel said evenly. "It's just me." The woman's eyebrows lifted, then lowered in sympathy that felt almost condescending. "You know," she said slowly, "we found babies really thrive when the mother is involved in the drop-off and pick-up process." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "And I've found my son thrives when someone actually takes care of him. Can you take the application or not?" 2 hours later, he got the call, the spot had been filled. He knew it wasn't about paperwork. That night, his neighbor, an older man named Walt, knocked on the door. Walt was retired, spent most of his time fixing up classic cars in his garage. "Heard you got the short end at the daycare," Walt said, stepping inside with a bag of groceries. Daniel shrugged. "They said they were full." "Yeah, and I'm a ballerina," Walt muttered. "Look, kid, you need someone in your corner. You think they play fair in those custody courts? You think they're gonna give you a medal for trying?" "I'm not looking for a medal," Daniel said quietly. "I just want to keep my son." Walt nodded. "Then you better start treating this like a fight." The next week, Walt sat with the baby while Daniel met with a family law attorney. The lawyer didn't sugarcoat anything. Courts lean on precedent, and precedent says kids, especially infants, go to the mother. If you want to keep him, you need to prove you're not just adequate, you're exceptional. How? Document everything. Feeding schedules, doctor visits, your work hours, the condition of your home. Show them you've built a life around him. So he did. The spiral notebook became his second shadow. Every feeding time, every ounce of formula, every pediatrician note, every receipt for diapers and clothes, he logged it all. He took photos of their walks in the park, of the baby's first laugh, of the tiny hand gripping his finger. When strangers in grocery aisles asked, "Babysitting today?" he smiled tightly and said, "Parenting." It's called parenting. 3 months later, the court date arrived. Daniel walked into the courtroom with his lawyer beside him, the spiral notebook in his hands. His ex wasn't there in person, just her lawyer, armed with arguments about maternal bonds and biological instincts. When Daniel took the stand, his voice was steady. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equal treatment. I'm here every night. I'm the one who gets up at 3 in the morning. I'm the one who takes him to the doctor. That's not instinct. That's commitment." The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. "Mr. Grant, you've provided a great deal of documentation." "Because I've had to," Daniel said. "Every time I walk into a room, people assume I'm temporary. That I'm holding my son until the real parent shows up. Well, the real parent is standing right here." The room went quiet. When the gavel finally came down that day, the decision wasn't final custody, not yet, but Daniel was granted primary placement until the full hearing. It was a win, but only one battle in the war. Back home, he laid his son in the crib and sat beside it, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He knew the fight wasn't over. But for the first time in months, he felt the faintest flicker of something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Years blurred into a rhythm that no longer felt like survival, it felt like life. Daniel became the dad who showed up to every school pickup, every parent-teacher meeting, every soccer game, rain or shine. He learned how to braid hair when his son's preschool teacher decided the crazy hair day theme applied to everyone. He became an expert at cooking pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, even if half of them collapsed in the pan. There were still moments when people looked at him sideways. A pediatric nurse once asked if Mom could fill out the consent form, and he'd had to smile through gritted teeth. But somewhere along the way, the sting faded. His focus wasn't on proving himself anymore. It was on raising the boy who now ran ahead of him in the park, laughing in the same deep-chested way Daniel's father once had. The court battles ended years ago. His ex had drifted out of the picture entirely, and Daniel stopped checking for her name in the mail. It wasn't that he forgave her, it was that he no longer needed her shadow hanging over their lives. Then came graduation day. The gymnasium smelled faintly of old varnish and fresh flowers. Families filled the folding chairs, cameras in hand. Daniel sat in the second row, wearing the same suit he'd worn to court all those years ago, the fabric a little tighter now. He tapped his foot, scanning the program until he saw it, his son's name under valedictorian. When the speeches began, Daniel clapped politely for the first few students. Then his son took the stage. He stood at the podium, tall, confident, the same eyes Daniel saw in the mirror every morning. "When I was born," his son began, "my dad and I started life together under unusual circumstances. A lot of people said he wouldn't make it. They said men don't know how to raise a baby alone. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. But my dad learned how to feed me at 3 in the morning. He learned how to help with homework he didn't understand. He learned how to listen, even when I didn't have the words to explain what I was feeling. He didn't just raise me. He showed me what love looks like when it's unconditional. Daniel's throat closed. And so today, his son said, voice catching just slightly, I want to dedicate this moment to the men who taught me that being present is the most powerful thing you can be. Dad, this diploma is ours. The audience erupted in applause. Daniel sat frozen for a second, then stood, clapping until his hands stung. His son stepped down from the stage, moving through the crowd until he was in his father's arms. Daniel held him there, the noise of the crowd fading into the background, and thought of that first night alone in the apartment, a crying infant in his arms, fear gnawing at him. He thought of every form he'd filled out, every sideways glance, every late-night doubt. All of it had led here. He didn't need the court's approval anymore, or the daycare's acceptance, or the stranger's validation in tea. He grocery store. He had something none of them could give, a son who knew, without question, that he was loved. And that was enough.